Wouldn't it be nice if living life was like riding on a train? You know, you could just consult the timetable, figure out what time the train that goes in the direction you want to go is leaving. That timetable will even tell you when you'll get there. It would be nice if life were like a train, but it's not. It's way more like a sailboat. It depends on which way the winds are blowing, what kind of currents are in the water. It's almost mystical the way that God directs boats differently than trains. So it's very appropriate that the experience that the apostles had to learn to trust Jesus was the experience of being in a boat during a storm that was at sea. You know, Jesus says something in this gospel that we should be very alert to. Those who follow the Lord closely know that Jesus can pull some very funny business on us. And he gives us little clues that it's about to happen. He says things like he said in the gospel today. Hey, everybody, let's cross over. Who wants to join me? Let's cross over. No big deal, right? But that's the problem. It's always a big deal. It's always something big. You never know where he's going to take you, and you never know when he's going to say it. Let's cross over. And you have no idea what storms might be on the way. A lot of folks got to know Dan beyond his hometown when he first was a student at Mount St. Mary's in Newburgh. He'd always been a lover of history, and he'd always loved the stories of old people. Everyone who knows Dan knows he just loves being around old people. As a matter of fact, sometimes people will walk away because they're like, I'm not old, why is he talking to me? But none of us is as young as we used to be, right? But he was born with a really sharp mind. I mean really sharp. Like he can remember everything, and he knows how things fit together, and he knows how things are traced back. I think it's one of the reasons why history is such a natural thing for him, because he understands how the pieces of the puzzle fit together, and he loves studying it and figuring it out. His parents said they knew that there was something about Dan when he was about 2 years old, and he was sitting at one of those little kiddie tables. And he was counting, and his mom was like, he's 2, so we'll count together. 8, 9, 10, and little Dan went along, 11, 12, 13. And she got a little nervous when he got to like 53, 54. She thought, what? It happened again in kindergarten. Mrs. Arnold was his kindergarten teacher, and she had worked before school, probably around Labor Day. You know how teachers have to work so hard in their classrooms? She had handwritten in perfect teacher writing the names of all the little boys and all the little girls that were in the class, and it was like a border all around the ceiling of the room. And little Dan was there, probably with his bus number pinned to his shirt, and he said, Mrs. Arnold, you forgot Sally. By process of elimination, he knew that someone was missing. His dad tells a great story about the same kind of thing. They had a little table in his house to teach the kids about shapes. And his dad said to him, as you would to a kid, hey, Dan, here's a funny little rectangle. And he said, Dad, that's a trapezoid. But as much as he knew and as smart as he was, he never liked the limelight, which is why his face looks like that right now. He never liked the limelight. As a matter of fact, here's what would happen when an awards night would come around. One year, he refused to get out of the car. But Dan, you're going to get so many awards tonight. Come on, let's get out of the car. He didn't want to get out of the car. Year 2, he was a little bigger, a little stronger. He wedged himself under the dashboard. Year number 3, he went in, and he swept awards night. It turns out that this is not that big a surprise, because his family tells me that his grandmother, McHale, was one of those people who everybody knew, Mom is unusually smart. She's unusually smart. And so people would say to her, hey, you know how in those old magazines they used to have those quizzes you could take to see if you were a genius? The organization Mensa, she would take the quizzes while making 5 things for dinner and putting on a pot of coffee. She'd quickly take the quiz and then they'd score it and she was a genius. Literally a genius. So she did it again and again, and she always was. So Dan came from that kind of stock. And when you're from that kind of stock and you're at a good private college getting ready for your future, things look bright. But guess, that's right when Jesus does it. He always does it. Let's cross over, Dan, he said. Let's cross over. So one day, he tells the story, in his junior year, he woke up and he'd never heard a voice before. But this voice, which wasn't audible but was strong, said, I want you to go to Mass today. Now, that would have been, for any college student, quite a task. A lot of colleges around that time when we start getting away from going to Mass, a lot of us, even folks who were really devoted to Mass when they were kids, when we're older, sometimes we start falling away. So it was unusual even on a Sunday to hear a voice saying, go to Mass. But this was like a weekday. Go to Mass on a weekday when you're a junior in college? So he went to Mass. He had to work to find out where it was because it's not obvious. It's in a little chapel somewhere on campus. And that's when it happened. Mark Twain says there are 2 most important days in your life. The day you're born and the day you find out why. Those are the 2 important days. So that day, Dan went to Mass, and guess what the psalm response was? You know it. Turn back a page. You are a priest forever in the line of Melchizedek. But you know how funny this is. This is how, Jesus says, let's cross over, and then he does this. At weekday Mass, the psalm response is not sung, it's spoken. And you have to say it again, and again, and again. You are a priest forever. In case he didn't get it the first time, you are a priest forever. You are a priest forever. And so Dan, he knows what a trapezoid is when he sees one. He says, God, do you want me to be a priest? That began his deep inquiry on the journey. But you have to go back even a little further to a very secret part of his family's life in order to understand how this all fits in. Because Dan's parents, who are here today, have always been very devout people. They were raised that way. And his mom, I think folks would say, is the one who sets the tone in the house of deep, deep faith. And she inherited that from her parents, who are known as Nanny and Poppy. Now, Nanny and Poppy were different from each other. They had a different kind of faith, both very strong, but Poppy had more of a traditional kind of faith that brought the grandkids to church. Nanny wasn't so much that way, they said. But she had one of those really rich, strong, Mediterranean, Italian grandmother relationships with God. In fact, when Father Bath, the family's longtime pastor who's sitting right here, went to anoint her, she said, Father, give me a double. And then she pulled him close and kissed his neck. She had that kind of earthy faith. She knew what a priest could do. She knew the power of this. So it's amazing that when she was getting ready to go home to God, one of the things the family remembers her saying is speaking out and saying, Jesus, you know I always loved you. You know. They had that kind of relationship. You know people who have that kind of relationship. We kind of envy them. So here's a story that isn't often told, but is very tender. When Dan was young, one day, as she is prone to do, Jesus' mother, our mother, the Blessed Mother, appeared to his mother. She didn't expect it. She wasn't expecting that would happen. But listen to how her mother came out of her voice. Listen to what happened. The Blessed Mother appears, and the first thing she said was, please tell Jesus I love him. And Mary said, he knows that. And what's the next thing she said? Who knows why? What does Jesus want of Dan? Her firstborn. What does Jesus want of Dan? And she said, the priesthood. He was young. He wasn't even out of high school yet. She tucked that away. You know how in Scripture it says Mary tucked those things, pondered them, and treasured them in her heart? That's exactly what Sharon did. She just tucked it away. And she had to be very patient because the timing of that being revealed to her was not the same as being revealed to her son. There's a Jewish story about how people are called that I think is really wonderful. The story is that a young man came to a rabbi one day and said, "Rabbi, I had a vision. I had a vision that I was the rabbi of a big congregation of 300 people." And the rabbi said, "Okay, but when 300 people come to you and tell you that they've been dreaming that you're their rabbi, then let's talk." But you see how this works. God had been coming to people. God had been telling people, Dan's your rabbi. Dan is called. Dan has something important to do. But you know how life is. So Dan tucks this call away. His mom tucks the call away. We all tuck the call away. And he goes on to a very cool career. For a young man, it's amazing how much he's done. He's been a professor. He's taught at Marist. He's studied and taught at UAlbany, SUNY New Paltz, Mount St. Mary's. But here's how God works. Jesus comes back and he says, "Dan, let's cross over. See, Nanny passed away, and she was such a beloved member of the family. And Nanny came to Dan in a dream. Do you see how this works? And she said, I want you to go live with Poppy." And Dan did. Now, that was not a lot to ask of him in a way, because Dan loved Poppy. Just loved Poppy. Enjoyed Poppy so much. Half of Dan's childhood was spent on Jenkins Parkway at Poppy and Nanny's. So that was not a hard thing to imagine. But imagine how much flexibility this young man showed in moving in with his grandfather in Hudson. They lived together 10 years. Dan would commute to his different professorship jobs, and Dan was working on a PhD at this time. And this is where it's remarkable, because Poppy was one of the ones who gave Dan his love of baseball, and that's a part of history that Dan loves. He knows all about different kinds of history, early American history, Irish history, but there's so many fascinating trivia things that are tucked away in Dan's head. Many of you know that recently we had a funeral here for a wonderful woman, Janice Flagle, who at one point in her life had been married to Billy Stafford. And recently I was talking with Dan and I said, I had a funeral of someone just wonderful, and her former husband was Bill Stafford. He said, of the Yankees? And then he called up on the internet this entire history of Bill Stafford that he had written, that was published for baseball enthusiasts. There's not a thing like that he doesn't know. But so the time that he was spending being a professor, working on his PhD, and living with Poppy was blessed time. You know how Jesus had that hidden part of his life, where we don't really know what happened between the time he was 12 and the time he was 30? Well, we know what was happening in Dan's life. He was getting Poppy's medicines all put together and watching baseball games with him and hearing stories of what life was like growing up. He got to learn that Poppy used to be a distributor of spirits and liquors, and so he knew all the business owners in town because he would be the one to bring the products that they would sell at their bars and restaurants. And so he knew that there used to be a place where the Wonder Bar is now called Lawrence's Tavern, and that it was owned by Father Stephen Yusko's grandfather, Mike Yusko Sr. He knew how those pieces fit together. That's right, the very same Father Steve Yusko who had his Mass of Thanksgiving this morning at Holy Trinity in Hudson. You see how this is. So what had happened as time went on is that call that he received back around 2001 is when that event happened. was one that he always had in the back of his mind. But he lived his life. He was pursuing his career. He was dating. His mother always quietly would smile, though, because she would think to herself, "Don't get too serious, Danny. I was talking to her mother." She'd keep that to herself, but she always had that thought. But the problem is, that's when you start talking with people in your PhD program and the people that you work with at these colleges, and you might tell some of them, "Here's something that God is calling me to do. I think I might need to follow this." And you know what they say to you? "Oh, that's crazy. Don't do that. You're so close to a PhD. Don't throw that away. What are you thinking? Take a vow of obedience? Live in some rectory in some town somewhere you don't even know where you're going to live? Take a vow of celibacy? You'd be such a great dad." That's the kind of thing that people say. That's why it's hard to share your calling with other people. But as one writer has said, you don't need to worry about other people approving of your calling. It wasn't a conference call. It wasn't a conference call. They don't need to know about the content of that call. That's for you to know. So in 2015, Dan, after a lot of thinking about this and praying about it, decided to go to an event that showed he was maybe a little bit more serious. But it was difficult because Poppy was getting older and older and older, and he loved living with Poppy. And it was very difficult for him to know, when is the right time to go to seminary? How should I do this? But Jesus always knows that no matter what storm we're facing, as long as he's in the boat with us, it's going to work out. In 2017, the vocation director was telling Dan, it's really time. If you're going to do this, you got to do it. It's important that you move forward on this path. But Poppy, unbelievably though, it became very clear to everybody that summer that Poppy was not able to live at home anymore. Right when Dan was most needed in the seminary, Poppy realized that he needed to go to the fireman's home in Hudson. And there was this night I'll never forget where Dan was going off to the seminary, his heart just torn because Poppy that night was in the hospital. He was at Columbia Memorial. And Dan and I went to dinner. I wanted to take him out to, just send him off with some kind of nice memory before he went to the seminary. But we couldn't stop talking about Poppy and how hard that was. So you know what we did? I said, Dan, let's go up and anoint him. So the night before Dan left for seminary, we went to Poppy's room in Columbia Memorial. His sister and her husband were there, and we prayed together, and we blessed Poppy. He even turned off the ball game for us to do it. It was very nice of him. And we had this incredible memory. And Dan went off to the seminary, and Poppy went off to the fireman's home, where he lived a very happy last chapter and died the next summer. The family knows that God was directing all of it, that timing was perfect. The second reading today was so perfect because it said, I am calling you to live fully, but not for yourself. I am calling you to live a fully alive life, but it won't be for yourself. And it won't involve what you're used to. I love when it says, the old ways have passed, new things have come. Jesus says it even clearer. Let's cross over. So I've talked with a lot of fathers about what it means to be a father. And as a priest who doesn't have children, one of the things that's very clear to me is that the day that your first child is born, nothing will ever be the same again. You will never be the same person again. You might have even been afraid of the day of that child being born. You might have not felt ready, but it doesn't seem to matter. It's almost like you receive a wound, a scar of sorts that you're going to carry with you forever. They say that once you become a father, it kind of scars your soul. You've got that mark on you forever. And what a beautiful way for us to understand what's happened to Father Dan. He's been marked. He's been scarred. And it's nowhere he can point to. It's everywhere. It's on his soul. And he's going to find out on Tuesday what the next step in the road is, because he took a vow of obedience yesterday. So that means immediately the road is unclear. The bishop will call him into a room on Tuesday and let him know where he'll spend the next 2 or 3 years of his life. And then he'll go just a little further down the road and then be told, now it's time to go here. And a little further down the road, and then there, and then there. One step after another. Wouldn't it be nice if life were like riding on a train? You look at the timetable. You pick the place you want to go, Poughkeepsie. And you know just how to get there and when you'll arrive. But life is not like a train. It's much more like a sailboat. But we can know for sure that we will be just fine on the whole journey, no matter what storms come up, as long as Jesus is there next to us, as he surely is with Father Dan McHale.